Morning. This is the Board of County Commissioners agenda setting. This is a regular meeting. It is 9:22 a.m. The session is set to go until 12:15 today, maybe a little later. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue, room 110. This is a hybrid meeting. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Amira Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell. We'll start our agenda today with homeless strategies.
Good morning, Commissioners. Keely Marino with Thurston County Public Health and Social Services. Just a brief update for you. The Homeless Services Advisory Board for the Regional Housing Council met for their second meeting yesterday in person at the atrium at 3000 Pacific. We discussed they're halfway through the review process and for the request for proposals or grant cycle that's happening. We will anticipate coming together and making recommendations on the 1st of May for all homeless services awards this year. And that's the Homeless Services Advisory Board update. And secondly, we had a wonderful luncheon yesterday. The Homeless Housing Hub for our Homeless Crisis Response System honored champions for housing that were nominated by their peers. There was a leadership award as well as a direct service award that were given yesterday, and just a special shout out to our commissioners Menser and Commissioner Mejia for attending yesterday, and Commissioner Mejia giving excellent opening remarks. We're very thoughtful, so thank you for those remarks. And it was just a special day. I took some photos, and hopefully those will be circulating. But it's always really special to be celebrating those who do such hard work in our community for homeless response and affordable housing. And that is all I have for today.
Thank you, Keely. Questions?
No questions, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Menser?
No.
Keely, I have a question, and it's more about the process. So before we had the regional housing council, the financial board, right? And basically how it was split up is staff would review some applications, and then members of the financial board would review other applications. Now, I'm wondering with the advisory council, as they're going into the grant cycle, is it going to be split like that, or is it going to be a full review? How is that process going to work?
Sure. So the Homeless Services Advisory Board, which is now 11 members strong, will be reviewing all homeless services grants. So that's 50 applications that came in. They've split them equally between two groups and are reviewing the entire application. Same for the Affordable Housing Board. Currently, I believe that they are reviewing 3 or 4 applications for this round, and then we'll be reviewing some more applications in June for the Home Fund Award. So all within the advisory boards are the reviews happening.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Okay, next is the review of the Board of County Commissioners draft agenda for a meeting of April 18th, 2023. Call the meeting to order at 2 p.m. The Pledge of Allegiance to be led by Commissioner Edwards and approval of the Tuesday, April 18th agenda. We have a presentation today, and it's Earth Day proclamation.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. I believe members of the committee will be present this afternoon. Mr. Bob Barnes will be in attendance, and I believe he's going to be bringing elementary school kids to be part of the celebration. And I, in particular, always look forward to see those little kids engaged on Earth Day.
So he's got confirmation that the students from Marshall Middle School are going to be attending, and there's also plans for them. They're going to have a videographer present to record their presentation to the board. Slides were just sent over to Thomasina this morning, so I'll get those printed off during our break and distributed to you guys to review prior to our meeting this afternoon.
How many slides?
4 or 5. It was pretty short.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Menser? No. Can we have pins for the kiddos? Can we bring some down?
I think we got a ton of them in the drawer down here, so I'll make sure that there's a stack of them for you.
Okay. Next is opportunity for the public to address the board and county manager's update.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have anything specific. They might be receiving public testimony this afternoon, but certainly you will. I'd like to follow up on a couple of comments you've received last week. One, related to cell tower needs in South County. My response will be certainly we understand the need, but also the county is not in the position to be a tower provider. We as a government agency process permits with any of the cell tower providers. And that will be my response. I think maybe an opportunity for members of that committee to reach out to some of the providers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, to see if they have an opportunity to install the cell tower. The testimony was heartfelt from my point of view, but unfortunately, the county really is not in the position to install or develop cell towers to provide services. And, sorry, any questions on that?
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner
No
Thorne?
questions, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Amundson?
Was it purely cell, cell service? I don't know, I get confused between the different infrastructures, the broadband infrastructure, which can be in the ground or,
I believe the testimony was related specifically to cell service. The phone calls dropped. But I think the internet service, as she stated, is a little spotty. Whether that can be resolved on the efforts that we have on the broadband in coordination with the Nisqually tribe, I don't know, but I don't think I can commit to that this afternoon to resolve that issue. It's too premature. But certainly we can explore that. The other comment that you received was from Mr. Pettit related to the REIT funding. We will be providing that information to you next week when we review the budget amendment. And again, you have seen the 10-year financial plan of the REIT 1, which includes paying of the loan that we utilize to purchase the Modman complex. And that has been part of the many discussions that you have. I think it has to be a difference between what is the cash balance, the report they provided to you, versus the overall plan, which includes the ending fund balance of the REIT 1. So it's more comprehensive than just seeing the cash that becomes available on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis in a year. And if you notice on that report that I provided to you, the general fund has 24 million, I believe, and that is the ongoing revenues. And that doesn't match what we expected to have overall revenue in the year. So it's two different areas that we need to address. I don't want to get too much into that conversation this afternoon, difficult to explain, but that's really the difference. It's the cash that we get on a yearly basis, the report that I provided to you last week, versus the overall financial plan of a fund that includes the ending fund balance and the revenue and expenditure decisions that the projections the staff provides to you. So in more detail, we'll provide that, an updated report next week. Anything to add on that, Rob?
I would just add that the report that we gave you was a point in time. So at the end of every month, Financial Services reports the cash in the fund. And that's, Mr. Pettit had said, there's no cash in your account. And we showed you there's 5 million in cash. So, but that is a point in time. And we'll have the financial plan when we do the budget amendment.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Well, it seems like I asked this question, I don't know, 3 or 4 months ago. Did we pay off that loan or something that we made for the Mottman building?
That is scheduled for June of this year.
I thought we paid it off already.
No, it's coming up and again, we'll go through that financial plan again, which includes the line item of the paying of the loan at that time. And you will see what the overall ending fund balance is, because it's, the cash report that we receive is just a snapshot in time. Doesn't include the overall picture.
with respect to REIT, how often does money come in? How often do you receive?
Daily. Money comes in daily to the REIT account.
So every day you got a different cash balance? It's not just like a twice a year
Nope.
payment from property tax or
The
something.
No,
property
it
taxes
it is
comes
not
in.
at all
Because it's
like
coming
the
from
property tax. And property tax trickles in throughout the year, but we get the big payments in April and October. But REIT, because people are recording their real estate transactions every business day,
I didn't know if the
We
state
get-
held it up and doled it out in
Nope.
chunks. or-
comes straight into our auditor's office. That's where the payments are made.
Okay.
So more to come, but I will not address that particular testimony this afternoon. It's more complicated.
Okay. Moving on to consent items. And this is a new one. Item 3A from the Commissioner's Office, work notice of intent to lease.
Yeah, this is a brand new item for your consideration, commissioners. And just to give you a little bit of a background, back on January 10th of this year, we had a conversation with the board with the opportunity to use portions, about up to 25 acres at the Waste and Recovery Center, to see if we can partner with Puget Sound Energy in a vendor to install solar panels. That's really the genesis of this. Working through Rebecca, with our attorneys. As any public entity and any public process, we cannot just partner with a single individual or an organization without having the opportunity for others to weigh in. So this particular item is for you to authorize publishing the notice of intent to negotiate a lease for up to 25 acres on this property, which is located at 2420 Huggen Bay Road in Lacey in the Hawkesbury area. In the notice of intent, this Thurston County is interested in leasing such area to individuals, organizations, or entity who has a presence in Thurston County. That's really the intent of this item, just to make sure that we notice it, have the opportunity for individuals and any other organizations that may be see an opportunity to partner with the county as well as with Puget Sound Energy for installation of solar panels. This is the first step. When and if we get to the point of selecting a potential contractor or a partnership with PSC, then we will bring to the board an actual lease agreement that will be very prescriptive in terms of how we are going to be partnering with the waste and recovery centers without sacrificing the operations of the work, because that continues to be an essential element of public works. So it's a lot of work needs to be done, and again, this is the first step following the direction that we received from the board back on January 10th, 2023. I know that Rebecca was supposed to be here this morning, unfortunately has a family emergency. She's joined us via Zoom. If she's willing to add additional information, she's listening. There you go, Rebecca.
Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, Ramiro. Ramiro covered it very well. This, as he said, this project is a collaboration among the Climate Mitigation Program and the Board of County Commissioners Office and the Public Works Department. And my colleagues here in Public Works are also on the line. Craig Sisson and Jeff Bickford have been intimately involved in every step of developing this notice of intent, as well as the prosecuting attorney's office who drafted the notice of intent to lease. And this project, as you know, contributes to the goals of the Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan, as well as the county's strategic plan. It would provide up to 25 acres of open land on the closed landfill at the Wark site for a solar energy project. There's a growing movement across the country to develop solar on closed landfills and other brownfield sites. This is a very fitting use of these sites that cannot be developed for other purposes and often have very good sun exposure, and is compatible with the ongoing monitoring that needs to be done on a closed landfill, doesn't interfere with that. And there are solar developers who specialize in developing these kinds of projects on landfills. I think that the county manager covered everything else. As he said, this is the first step, just to publish a notice of intent to lease. Puget Sound Energy does release requests for proposals from time to time to develop distributed solar projects or smaller scale solar projects that would feed directly into their electric grid. So if we did move forward, the project would be managed directly by Puget Sound Energy through an agreement between them and a private solar developer. The county would just lease the land and receive revenue in the form of lease payments for the life of the asset, which could be 25 years or more for solar panels. So yeah, I'm here for any questions, as my colleagues in Public Works are as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Yes, my question would have to do with individuals oftentimes, I believe, purchase solar panels for, say, their residence, and then it offsets the bill that they get from the power company somehow. Is this going to be a similar application where it'll cut back on the power bill that the county currently pays to Puget Power?
This would be, I could explain that, Ramiro, if
Right.
you like. This would be different. Actually, it's described as a front of the meter, a proposal for a front of the meter solar installation as opposed to behind the meter, which is what you're talking about. If you put rooftop panels on your house, that's behind the meter. It's connected to your own electricity meter and directly through net metering is going to offset, as you said, the energy use in your house. This is in response to Puget Sound Energy request for proposals where it would be what's called front of the meter, which means it just goes straight into their grid. The reason for that is really this would be up to about a 3 megawatt installation. It's much larger than would be needed at that site. So it would be more effective to just streamline it, transfer the electricity directly into the grid and have it be managed by Puget Sound Energy. For smaller installations on rooftops, a behind the meter solution is probably preferable. Does that make sense?
Well, it does. I'm just wondering about the revenue. Is one going to balance out? That's all. I mean, I'm just curious. Are we getting ahead of the game by doing that? Is that over where the dog park is?
No,
Yes.
the dog park will not be affected, just to make sure the dog park will not be affected. It's nearby, but it's no part.
Same property
Same
though?
property, yeah, but the dog park will continue to serve its function.
So do we know, will that end up, I mean, the county's got a big power bill in a lot of other areas as well, so I'm just wondering, I mean, is it just we're gonna have money coming in from a lease that goes towards the power payment, or can we do something to even stay on top of this better? I'm just curious.
Yeah, and all good questions. I think probably when we get to the point of the lease agreement, determine how much the cost of leasing this area. But my gut sense at this point, the county will come ahead financially by the lease payments that we'll receive on a yearly basis versus what we pay on the power. So there is going to be a financial benefit, I believe. But we can probably narrow down the details when we have the lease agreement in place. We can negotiate that.
More to come, sounds like.
Yes, sir.
Questions, Commissioner Munster? No questions from me.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Item 4A from the Auditor's Office, approval of the voucher list.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. This is for your consideration to approve the voucher list for the week of March 27, 2023, for a combined amount of $3,794,575.24. There's still some items related to the tenant improvements here at the tram. That is why we have it on a department item.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Munster? Okay. Central Services, item 5A, lease amendment extension with BW Investments.
Madam Chair, I request this item to be removed. We're not ready, I believe, on this item. Or are we ready on this item?
This one we're not ready.
Okay, so we're not ready, so we'll take this item out for your consideration this afternoon, and we'll bring this back when we have a little more consolidated agreement.
This one's for facilities.
Yeah,
Okay.
facilities.
Okay, and then so item 5B, lease amendment extension between Thurston County Sheriff's Office and J4 Associates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This request is to extend the current lease that we have on the property located on 7721 New Market Street. And the intent of, and this is where the field operations office for the sheriff's office is located. The intent of this extension will allow us to work with the program manager, project manager, a little bit of tenant improvements to enhance the presence of the sheriff's office in this location. And this is all associated with the improvements that we have on the courthouse campus. As we move portions of the sheriff's office from building 3 to building 5, there is also an opportunity to move other functions of the sheriff's office currently at the courthouse to the new market location. One of which is the evidence room, and that is going to be something that we need to really work with the owner of that location. I believe the owner of the building is willing to work with the county. And the intent of this will be any tenant improvements impacts will be embedded into the future leases as we move along. So this 1-year extension really will give us the time to narrow down the details and work with the property owner to get us where we need to be and meet the needs of the sheriff's office. Richard?
You explained it perfectly. Just an extension to give us more time to get the tenant improvement projects.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
This is the same item we discussed last week, right?
Sure.
I am curious about the location on, even though we're gonna remove this one. It's just being removed and it'll come back
Yes, because
in a
the-
day or a week or a month.
Yeah, or maybe in the next week or next 2 weeks. We are still currently, the first item, 5A, to clarify. We're still working with the property under terms and conditions of the extension of the lease. Yes.
And this is for, I'm just curious. the
So this
location.
is where we have portions of facilities located in this area. And as you may recall, facilities will eventually move to one of the buildings on the Mudman area. And Robin provided with great perspective last week. They move in facilities into one of the buildings of the Mudman area. Doesn't require too much of a tenant improvements. And in fact, in the current location, where we needed tenant improvements, facilities did on their own. They use that as a training ground for facilities.
They did a good job.
Yeah, they did a good
fixing
job.
that.
So-
But I thought we were moving ahead, but now we're not.
No, we just need time.
Okay.
We're moving,
Oh, okay.
so we're just negotiating with the property
come.
owner at the time.
People who are currently in the space need to move out.
Okay.
So we just need
Yeah,
time.
we don't need to get into it. I'm just
The plan
curious.
continues to be the move that we presented to the board. Yeah.
Thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Mensah? And no questions for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Information technology, item 6A, renewal of annual maintenance for Munis.
Good conversation. We also had this on this item last week. And again, this is a request to extend the current maintenance contract that we have related to the Munis software that we currently utilizing. And eventually this system will be replaced with a new system that we're planning to, that is the DC Connect. That's the new name. And the board requested that perhaps to change the current approval to 1 year, and then 1 year we'll evaluate this particular item. This has been already included on your item. And again, this is already included on the IT budget to continue to provide the maintenance services to the Munis software. Sherry, the IT director, is here. I think we need to change the interim.
Okay,
Anything to add, Sherry?
questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No, this is the extortion part that I don't like, but I guess it is, right? So we have no choice on this matter. The one thing I might mention is that the dollar amount kind of split up between current expense and non-current expense players on that issue. That'd be to Robin, I guess.
I'm sorry, ask me
He's talking
again.
about the internal rates in which we're gonna be
The
paying for this.
internal rates, it's kind of shared between
Yes,
current
yes,
expense and non-current.
yes.
The same
across all
60,
funds.
40 or.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Menzer? Yeah, this is, I don't, not too thrilled about this one, but it's, we need to do it. Okay, thank you, Sharon. Public Works, item 7A, contract award for purchasing and planting trees as mitigation.
Thank you, Commissioner. This item, you have reviewed on a couple of occasions, the specifics of this item. On March 23rd, 2023, the Department of Public Works received 2 bids to purchase 60 Oregon white oak trees. They will be planted as mitigation for the road improvements along Marvin Road, upgrade phases 1 and 2. Just phase 1, I believe. Marvin Road improvements, just phase 1 or phase 2?
Yeah, just phase one.
Oh, phase 1, which is from 22nd to Union Mills. A little bit of long history related to why the Oregon white oaks is considered to be a mitigating, is similar to the pocket gopher, where we have the soils to be the environment in which the pocket gopher thrives. In this particular case, the Oregon white oak is the environment in which the western gray squirrel, which is a listed endangered species, is where it thrives. So as part of the regulation is every time that we affect the habitat, the Oregon white oak, we need to mitigate by planting new ones. So this is an interesting process because as soon as we purchase, if you agree with awarding this contract, the 60 Oregon white oaks will be put in a nursery so they can grow for the next 2-3 years because they need to reach to a certain level of maturity before they can be planted on site. Right?
Yeah, so that's correct. The Oregon white oaks are expected to be purchased by the contractor, and they'll be planted in a nursery for the next 2 years, and then planted after our construction project's completed. Then they'll be relocated into our designated planting area.
My only question on it would be, the eastern gray squirrel is knocking off the western gray squirrel quite fast. And if the western finally succumbs to the challenge and is not around anymore, is that problem gonna be eliminated, or do we have to continue this kind of stupidity for years and years and years, even though the western gray is gonna be gone because it's already been overcome by the eastern gray? And the difference is, for those citizens that are paying attention, one is a large squirrel, more than twice the size of the western squirrel. The eastern is more than twice the size, and they're winning. Are we supposed to go out there with a BB gun and shoot the invaders, or? It makes so much, that it does not make good sense to continue this battle if they're not there. Do we even know if they're there anymore? I thought the westerns were gone already.
So,
do we care?
and maybe answer that comment in a way that, that is the reason why the western gray squirrel has been listed as an endangered species. And because it's the risk, perhaps that species will disappear. And the efforts the federal government has put in place is to make sure that we replace the habitat, in this case, the Oregon white oak. Whether I have not seen from the federal government the recovery plan for the western gray squirrel. I can probably research as to what the recovery plan will be. And I don't know if they have a count in which that, like similar to the bald eagle, they had a count and now they have counted, perhaps the species has recovered. I don't know if in this particular case they have a count. It's a little bit different because here's we protect the habitat. And, but again, I don't know if the recovery plan includes any specific number of western gray squirrel.
I don't want to get into counting and stuff, but I would like to hear at least somebody ask the question of either U.S. Fish and Wildlife or our state game department. If this is happening, I mean, U.S. Fish and Wildlife on the spotted owl issue, they actually hired people to shoot an encroaching owl on that particular species. I don't know, is that coming now? Do we have to put a guard out there on the
Maybe what we
oak
can,
trees?
maybe
Or
what we can ask staff to, is to report on the recovery plan for the western gray squirrel at a later date. And that probably give us a glimpse as to how the federal government is planning to manage that. Will that work?
Yeah, it'll work for me. I know this money comes out of the road fund to do this, but it comes out of our ability to do something that might be more beneficial for the community with that road fund. If there's no more western grays there, why not use it to fix potholes? You know, do something else. Let's try to use some common sense in this endeavor if we can. That's all. Thank you.
Open season on eastern gray squirrels.
No, no.
Is there an instance where, I thought there was, but now I'm questioning myself. Is there an instance where a plant has some kind of status irrespective of whether it's connected to habitat for an animal?
I'm not sure about
Because I've
that.
seen prairie species listed, plants.
List the species, yeah, you're right.
Is
It's not
that just about pocket gophers, or is there some status given to plants that are being wiped out?
I've heard there is some protection efforts related to actually flora,
Yeah,
because it's the endangered species is flora and fauna.
right,
Yeah.
and I had always thought that oaks had some sort of, with our critical areas ordinance, and, I mean, it's not an Endangered Species Act thing, obviously, but there's some state law or something that had something to do with oaks, not having anything to do with squirrels.
I think the Oregon white oak is related to the western gray squirrel protecting the habitat, but we can explore that.
I'd be curious to know the answer to that. But it might be I don't know if that's a public works
No, a
question.
good conversation to have. I think first will be to report on the recovery plan for the western gray squirrel. And that will probably give us a glimpse if the Oregon white oak is a protected species from the flora point of view of the federal government.
Yeah, we'll check in with our biologists, our on-staff biologists, and come back with the report.
Okay.
Moving on. Item 7B, right clarification of portions of the plat of railroad addition to the Rochester and James Street.
Thank you, Commissioners. You reviewed this item last week. And this is a proposed vacation of a couple of strips of property based on the plat that was in place back in June 22nd, 1891, called the James replat, which it was recorded back in February 1911. The hearing examiners held a public hearing where they received public testimony, and they recommended the Board of County Commissioners to go ahead and process the vacation request. Since there is not a public use, this pieces of right-of-way has not been opened to the public, and that allows the county to vacate those properties to an individual who's interested. One of the steps in the process to the board approve this particular proposal is to get compensation from that. In the past, we have taken a couple of steps to get to this point. And Craig, who is on Zoom, reported last week that perhaps the compensation has already been put in place and is in the amount of $5,260. So that had this vacation process had been streamlined if the board considers approval. Craig.
Craig Sisson, Real Estate Services Manager with Public Works. I think that the county manager covered it well. I'm here for any questions.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Well, I'd like to use this opportunity to thank Craig for getting this all straightened out and let the public know that if they're wondering about the bureaucracy of government, just take a look at this. it's over 100 years. And we're finally getting somewhere to get something straightened out. Thanks to Craig. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Munzer? Okay, no questions for me. 7C. Resolution and call for full bids for the Black Lake Elmore Road Bridge Approach Repair Project, CP number 77175.
This is a follow-up item the board approved last week related to it. Last week, the board approved the closure of this roadway and also approved the detour route in order for us to conduct the work that needs to be done on this particular bridge approaches. So this particular item is for you to consider authorizing the Department of Public Works to set public bidding to receive the proposals and select a contractor to do the work on the approaches, not on the bridge. And long history, we'll be more than happy to provide that history to you and the interim county engineers here as well as Brian.
Very,
I don't want to steal your thunder on this one, man.
this has been an ongoing issue since the bridge was initially constructed in the early 1990s. This is a unique area of the county. It's just a big peat bog and the soils are just terrible and they can't support the bridge approach slabs. And so since 1990, those slabs have settled more than 2 feet and create a safety and liability issue for vehicles as well as bicyclists. This repair includes driving 540 timber piles into the ground and then rebuilding the approaches on top of them. This will prevent us from having to send operations out there every couple of years to put more asphalt on these approaches, which adds more weight and actually compounds the issue. It causes the approaches to settle faster. Any questions?
How far you said it settled?
2 feet since 1990.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
When you put this out to bid, does that bid, is it accompanied by a design already laid out that requires those 540 poles to be driven in? And that's down to bedrock or something, I take it, right?
Yes, sir. So we hired a geotechnical consultant to go ahead and recommend a repair in this instance because of the uniqueness of the situation. So we wanted to make sure that we reached out to the experts to go ahead and design this repair.
A big portion of the problem here is as the county has tried to address this problem over the years, is that as there's repaving, it adds to the weight, which then in turn sinks into the peat bog. So my question is, on the 540 piles that, let's just say, if we could cut the price in half on this particular contract, could a bidder say, well, I believe that I could solve this problem by driving 200 piling in place, putting a metal cap, steel plates, whatever it might be, on top of those new piling and pave over that, and that thus eliminate the sinking process and put the paving product over top of those with more spacing, because I'm trying to figure out why it would take so many piling if we laid a metal mat. And I know that we're not now talking maybe about the military version, but maybe a 1-inch steel plate could lay on top of that whole thing and cut the price down. It just seems like a crazy price to pay $3 million, and there might be another solution. I'm not questioning, I'm not an engineer, I'm not questioning what you guys designed, but could a bidder bid on this and say, well, I can solve the problem, it's only gonna cost you $1.5 million because I'm gonna do it with 200 piling instead of 500 piling? Is that a possibility? Is there any common sense in government left at all to allow for something like that?
So I can, there is a process for that. WashDOT has laid out, we use WashDOT standard specs in our projects. And there is if the contractor wants to hire their own expert to provide a business case, in this case, that would be presented to us for approval, yes, they can do that. But that's the reason why we reached out to a geotechnical consultant who does this type of work all the time, because they've gone through this process before and they understand what's gonna be the most cost-effective method for this repair.
What's the life of this project when completed? Is it good for 100 years? Is it good for 50 or 200? What is it?
I would say it's gonna be good for the theoretical life of a typical structure is 75 years. In this case, we're using timber piles and everybody gets nervous when you hear about timber piles. But when you drive a timber pile below the ground, there's no oxygen. So it can't decompose. So like, as an example, you can go out to some of these train trestles in the area and you can dig down 2 feet below the ground and cut them off and it looks like a brand new log's in the ground. But that's why we're using timber, because it's not gonna deteriorate underground and it's a lot cheaper than steel or concrete.
And how long do these pipes have to be? 90 feet?
60.
60 feet? Oh, that's even better. Okay. It's better, but I still don't like it, but.
We just saved you a third of the cost.
Maybe a good opportunity will be to have a field visit when the contractor is driving those piles, to have a good, if you're interested.
Process. I'm just trying to save taxpayers some money, that's all. And again, we could do more with our roads. If we save $1 million, we can do a lot of upgrades on our existing roads, so that's my concern. Thank you. I guess that's it for me, ma'am.
Questions, Commissioner Munson? No questions for me. And then we have one more item from Public Works, item D, on-call engineering and professional consultant services contract.
Yeah, this item was not on your agenda when you reviewed this last week, but certainly it was part of the conversation during agenda setting. We will have us to bring an AIS for you to consider taking up formal action. This is related to the on-call consultants, the Department of Public Works uses. It was a request for qualifications back in 2018. And the result of the request for qualifications selected a few firms to provide services to Public Works. And those services are related to activities and a set of expertise that perhaps the department doesn't have in place. And that is on a case-by-case basis. This has been effective, and you just heard on the previous item, we hired a geotechnical engineer. We don't have a geotechnical engineer expertise in the department, so we utilize those consultant firms to help us navigate the specific technical challenges in Public Works. You heard last week, this item is to extend the last extension of the contract, of the request for qualifications that we have. As a result, increasing the ceiling of those, of the dollar amount of some of those contracts. Anyways, that's the opening statements. Rick, you want to add anything?
Thank you again, Commissioners. I want to go back to a couple of items where you had questions last week.
You introduce yourself for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick Thomas. I'm the manager of our Projects Program Management Office in Public Works. There were 3 items that you had asked for a little more information on, so I wanted to try to clarify that to the best of my ability today. The first question related to how would we be using these consultants for specific projects going into the future for the next year and a half as this contract continues. Give you a summary of that. There's 32 different projects that we have on our list for consultants to help support in the next year and a half. We have 7 that are stormwater projects, 4 that are water and sewer projects. We have 4 fish passage projects. We have 12 roads and bridges projects, 3 parks and trails projects, and 2 solid waste projects. So it's a total of 32. And as you can see, it basically across all of the different business departments that we have within Public Works. So I hope that helps with the question in regards to just the plan that we have going forward and why we do need these caps extended for our funding. Another question that was asked was, how do you determine the specific consultant to be used on a specific contract or a specific project? And I have a couple of responses to that. The first would be when we initially put forth the RFP back in 2018, we specifically listed out criteria for the proposers to respond to that included specific information about their expertise in different engineering fields. And it was a broad range. So we asked them to give us their experience and qualifications in specific engineering items such as stormwater management, water and utilities, solid waste projects and environmental projects, construction management, surveying. So a whole variety of different expertise that we asked them to present to us. Some companies could provide virtually all of them, such as HDR. There were others of them like Landau that is a real specialty firm in regards to geotechnical work, and they're actually the ones who did the work on the Blackwood Bridge project we just talked about. KPG, for example, does quite a bit of work with construction administration. And they also do facility type work such as parks and trails, restrooms and those kinds of facilities. Transpo and Fair and Piers, for example, although not working a whole lot, I'm going to say on the design side of our projects, they have a real expertise when it comes to doing research and evaluation for impact fees or for master planning of transportation systems. And so these firms were selected based upon those types of qualifications. So when we go about then determining which one of those consultants we want to use on a project, we'll look back at the qualifications and experience that they had, that they submitted to us, and we'll match that up the best way that we can to the actual project requirements that we have. In addition to that, for just documentation purposes, we do have an internal form that we have developed that helps us to literally write down a justification as to why we selected the specific consultant to work on a specific project. So I could go into a lot more detail. I know we have limited time, but I hope that gives you a little bit of background and understanding in regards to the specifics of the expertise of the consultants that we have. And then the last item, there was a question about how would the cap work with the potential of us getting additional infrastructure funding. And I did not address that one as clearly as I had hoped to, so I hope this helps. We go through a very specific prioritization process every year in regards to which projects we want to basically design or construct or plan. And what we would do in the case of, let's say we apply for and get funding for an infrastructure project, we would go back through our prioritization process and determine what projects may have to come further down on the list in order for us to be able to do a project where we get funding that's not necessarily coming out of county funds and really leveraging our funding. And if that were the case, we would then make a decision as to which projects would go first and which ones would go second or third. And thus, there may be a project that would maybe drop off the list, and the monies that we had set aside for that consultant could then be used for that consultant to work on an infrastructure project. So those were the three items that I recall from our conversation earlier. If there's any other questions that you have in your mind or more clarification, I'd be happy to address that.
Thank you, Rick, for bringing back that information for us. Commissioner Edwards, questions?
So we really haven't went out for bid almost for 5 years, is that?
Correct.
So we're kind of extending what we're doing by about 1/3 of the authority to spend money. So we're raising the potential expenditure by about 1/3. I'm just taking a shot in the dark. I don't know that that's true, but.
It's not quite that much. We're extending from about 12.1 million to 13.9. So
Oh, okay, so it's not a
10,
third.
12% increase.
I guess maybe I saw it might be a third in certain categories. I'm not sure, but anyway, but we will still have even though we're given the authority to expend that money, will the board still see these projects come through and have some oversight on whether or not we move forward on that particular one? I mean, it's all part of the comprehensive plan or
Part of the TIP that you approve on a yearly
on a
basis.
yearly basis, so.
Yeah, we will not be working on any projects that are of surprise to you, because as the county manager said, they are on the CIP. And in our plan that's
They won't be able
presented.
to work on any projects that are not included on that list. The board.
I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can have some oversight on, well, projects like Matt just presented. You know, I'm trying to figure out ways to save tax dollars as we move forward on those. Not critical of staff whatsoever. I believe they're doing great, but, so we will still see some of that oversight ability come in, I guess, right?
And this may be a good time, where staff is planning on a briefing to the board and looking holistically the project delivery in a way. Delegation of authority, the touching points the board will have, and within the whole, without, breaking, stealing the thunder, one of the elements is to come every quarter or every so often to the board and give you a specific timeline and the status of all the projects that we're currently working on. So this briefing is coming up, and we have a conversation with the board holistically on how the county manages the project delivery, both in public works as well as facilities. It's a joint briefing that we're planning to do.
I guess maybe for the last question would be, as we move forward with this, and we've not adjusted or went out for bids since 2018, which is, it's quite a while, but do we have other businesses out there that have developed in that 5-year plan, that 5-year period, that might want to get in on this bidding process, and consequently, when you bring competition in, sometimes you get a better deal. And that's kind of my concern, is always getting the better deal for the taxpayers. So even though we're not going out with an RFP maybe for additional bids, have you ever been contacted by a new firm that might say, hey, I can do this myself, how come I don't get to bid on this? I'm just trying to keep a fairness perspective going with all businesses in our community, rather than us pick winners and consequently create losers by maybe not getting in on the activity. So is that available to, I mean, have you had people come in? Nobody's come to me and said, hey, I'm a engineering firm, I'm gonna drive piling for half price. That's never been brought to my attention. But is it a possibility that exists out there? I don't want to get 100 phone calls about things I know nothing about. I'm not an engineer. I'm just trying to watch the purse. That's my whole job here. So, if someone was to get a hold of you, that's not the right person to get a hold of. They get a hold of Matt, hey, I can bid on this, or do they have to come to us? So we're sitting here and then I would say, well, such and such a firm has been in existence now for 3 years. They're not on the list. How do they get on the list?
Next year, they'll have the opportunity.
Each year they have this?
Next year, we'll have the opportunity.
You go out for an RFP, Public Works goes out every 6 years.
Okay, so there is a
Central
time frame.
Services is aligning to that same, but we've been going out every 5 years. And this is only for A&E. Once you've got A&E finished, then we go out for bid for all of the components of these projects.
Because this is, we're just exercising the additional 1-year extension of the contract. This is what it is, including, but next year you will see an item authorizing the department to go with a request for proposals. Then everything is open for any firm, any new firms that come to the business. And, it's just.
And even this authority that we might be giving today to raise it to, I don't know, 13 million or whatever it was, it doesn't mean that money's gonna get spent.
No.
You know,
It
it's
raises the ceiling.
just the authority
Raises the
is
ceiling,
raised.
yeah, raises the ceiling and gives the flexibility for the department to utilize the services of a consultant.
Okay,
We may not need them, but having that ability is always helpful.
thank you.
If I might, just one last comment on that. The process that we go through to have an on-call consultant contract like this is extremely familiar to the industry, and it's used virtually by all governmental agencies as well as private sector. So it's an efficient way to be able to
Set up
get
in
these
state
services.
law, it's in state procurement. This is how we do it.
I'll check on that pile driver. Okay, thank you.
Field trip, Commissioner, field trip.
No.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer? Thank you, Rick. No questions for me. A lot of good conversation.
Thank you, good job.
Okay, next, we have a public hearing at 3:30, and it's public hearing for assessment of fair housing and consolidated plan needs and outs.
Yeah, we have attached a PowerPoint for you. This stuff is going to go through as part of the staff presentation. And depending on the public testimony you might receive this afternoon, you have two options for you to consider. One is to close the public hearing, and the other action for your consideration, depending on the public hearing comments that you may receive, is to approve this particular item. If the board sees that there's a need for a follow-up briefing, depending on the public testimony, we will go ahead and schedule that as soon as possible.
I have a question for Tom. Just looking at the slides show, I'm seeing 31 pages, and I'm wondering how long is the presentation?
We're going to streamline that presentation this afternoon for sure.
Yes, we are. So wanted to provide that information. I'll try to keep it to around 15 minutes.
There's a lot of slides, and I'm gonna hang on to my packet, so staff, please don't recopy it from this afternoon. Is it a waste of paper?
So
Is it a waste of paper to recopy these for the afternoon sessions? The commissioners could hold on to them.
Yeah, I'll be holding on to mine as well.
What have we had from the public on this particular topic?
Tom,
What
have you
kind of
received any-
input, comments and such?
I can share more this afternoon, but we have received just one or two comments from the public, one from Habitat for Humanity. I also believe the staff member from the City of Olympia may be providing public comment at the direction of the Olympia City Council. This similar presentation was given to the City of Olympia Council about 10 days ago. So just one or two comments, but that's about it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I assume it's support so far?
Yes, I think they'll be advocating for affordable housing to be a high priority in our consolidated plan.
Okay. Any further questions? And we'll move on to review of our draft agenda for April 25th.
This agenda is pretty slim, commissioners. There's always, I ask the question, whether you'd like to consolidate the agenda items, whether bring some items for this afternoon or maybe for the following day. We really only have no consent items, and we have 3 items that could be moved one way or the other. But we'll review those items here shortly.
So April 25th, we'll review the items, and if we need to move them, then we can. But we can, there's also that availability to cancel the April 25th meeting. Is there any feelings one way or another?
Time issues, do we have any time issues on any of it?
Some of the items we can probably bring for your consideration this afternoon. We just add them to today's agenda, and I think for the most part, all of them will fit that category, including the voucher list.
Okay.
Then you
I'm-
have a robust agenda this afternoon.
I don't have any burning desires to either have a meeting or not. I mean, I'm just, whatever works, that's what I'm looking for, whatever works.
Okay.
I vote to consolidate them. I'm gonna be in recovery. They told me to stay out of work for a week, so I was gonna try to push it and be at the board meeting, but it'd make me feel better if we don't need to have one, to not have one.
Good for me, that's
Yeah,
fine.
that's fine. Okay, so the bike to work proclamation, let's go ahead and move that for the week after.
Yeah, for June.
It would be May
May
2nd.
2nd.
We do have the Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month to proclaim that day as well. We do have one on May 9th for Public Service Recognition Week. Do you mind double proclaiming on the 2nd, or do you want me to
Double
shuffle some of
proclaiming
those?
on the 2nd.
Totally
That's
up to
right.
you guys.
Suggesting to go with the double proclaiming.
We've double proclaimed in the past.
Yeah.
We'll double proclaim again in the future.
Sounds good. Yeah,
Okay.
May 2nd.
May 2nd? Yeah.
And then, okay, after the auditor's office for the week of April 3rd.
Yeah, that's on your department item. Again, there is still some small amounts related to the atrium. I just checked this particular one, and that includes the payment of the stables that you see right here. So still paying for that furniture.
Okay, so then we
We
can
can
move
bring
that
this
one.
for this afternoon.
Okay. Any questions on that item?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Moving forward to community planning and economic development, item 4A. Set a public hearing for the code clarification and correction amendment. This is in relation to a briefing we had last Wednesday.
Yeah, last week. Yeah, and this is for you to consider setting the public hearing. I believe the board was in concurrence to go ahead and perhaps taking a formal action to set the public hearing. As you heard last week, there's corrections and clarifications that included miscellaneous clerical errors, clarification and expansion of the non-conforming non-residential uses and structures, and update design board posting procedures. And that's what probably the. Okay.
Okay.
So this is just a follow-up on that conversation for you to set a public hearing. And this item can be dealt this afternoon, if you like. And after that, you receive public testimony before you take an action, final action on this.
Andrew, anything you would like to add?
Nope, the county manager summary covers it perfectly.
Okay. questions for commissioners on this item?
No, we're good.
Okay, are we ready? Do we want to move it to this item or
Sure, give,
to this week?
give one more week for public
Yep.
input, I guess.
Okay, so we'll add it to this afternoon. Okay, item 5A from emergency services is medic unit procurement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The department is requesting to authorization to purchase 5 new paramedic units to be deployed in 2024. So if there's any good examples of supply chain issues, this item is right on point. And let me take you back to October of 2022, where the board really provided the direction to the Director of Emergency Services to get in the queue to at least secure the chassis of these new units. And we were fortunate, based on the direction the board provided back in October, to get in the queue of secure the chassis from the manufacturer. In this case, it's Ford, the Ford company. So right here, we're now in the process of getting us to the point to purchase the chassis for 5 units. And the next step is for the outfit to outfit the new units. They will be ready in 2024. No surprise, the supply chain issues and the cost has increased dramatically. And in fact, between 2021 and 2022, we have seen an increase between 25 to 30%. And I think that time is of the essence to get into this contract, at least secure some of the baseline cost, although we might be exposed to an additional cost increases. And that is why we have on your action a little bit deviating from the normal 10%. We're asking to go up to 15%, just to make sure that we cover all the potential overruns on this particular item. And again, this is part of the overall budget of Medic One, part of the overall strategy to replace those units. And Commissioner Edwards sits on the EMS Council, can probably further elaborate on this. But again, it's just the pressure of the timing, the pressure of the cost increases put us in the position to bring this item before you. Ben is present here to add additional perspective and answer any questions. Go ahead, Ben.
Good afternoon, commissioners. I know I really do appreciate being able to get the chassis approved back in October. When we approached you, we needed to get in the queue, just as County Manager Chavez has said. One thing that I did want to point out in this is that when we approve these medic unit purchases, this is for the betterment of the entire system. So just as a reminder on how we rotate our fleet, we tend to have a 5-year, or we try to have a 5-year frontline unit that rotates for another 5 years to the reserve status and then is surplused out into our community. I will point out that the units that we do purchase, one was recently surplus from one of our fire departments that was a former medic unit 25 years ago. And so these units do get the use that they need throughout the entire system, both from the ALS side and the BLS side, both from the paramedic level side and the EMT level service throughout our community, and really do get those uses out. We do get the use out of them that we need. Additionally, it's been incredible economic pressures on this. Ford's supply has dwindled. So in terms of what you're looking at is you're seeing a constricting availability of chassis, constricting availability of supplies to build these with increasing demand. And so what you're seeing is incredible inflationary components to this specific item. If you have any questions, please let me know and I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Any questions, Commissioner Edwards?
Not so much a question, but Ben, the EMS Council was on top of this as well.
Yes, and there'll be a secondary briefing tomorrow afternoon to brief them as to the extreme price increases, but they did approve in their biennial budget 2 for this year, and then expected to replace 3 more next year. And we had to, just as a reminder, we couldn't get the 2 this year, and so it's 5 next year to account for that rotational component.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Munster.
I've seen us piggyback on state contracts, but I've never seen us piggyback on somewhere in another part of the country. What is that all about? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. So as long as they meet the competitive bidding requirements that we have for the state of Washington, and then also meet the requirements that we have internally, we're able to piggyback on any of these contracts that have met those requirements as we go through it. This was also a contract that the county had previously piggybacked on and actually had an interlocal for, established back in 2016, I believe. And so you'll see the document for the interlocal component that it did meet the requirements for both the state and internally for the county, and therefore we could piggyback off of this specific contract.
How do you go about finding, I mean, if you're looking in Texas, you could be looking anywhere in the country, and there must be a bazillion contracts. How do you figure out this is the one we should be working with? I mean, how does that even happen?
Absolutely. So in terms of a lot of the contracts, I'm going to answer this a little bit more broadly. There are specific contracts, or we can look for and search for any ambulance contract that's been competitively bid for us to do an interlocal with. If somebody, let's say for instance, did go out and do an RFP on their own, we could even approach that other government municipality to sign an interlocal for that, as long as there was contract language embedded in their contract allowing for it. With that being said, what we look for are basically what's been most recently competitively bid and allows for a competitive price. And so when we're looking through these components and making sure that they're kept up to date, what we're looking for is something that's more recently bid out and has been recently updated in order to allow for a competitive cost comparison.
And is that and what is that? How does that help us? It just saves us the administration of doing our own RFP, or what is
Time.
what do we get out of it?
In terms of what we get out of this, so cooperative purchasing lets us, just like you said, leverage a lot of staff time that would go into an RFP process. That ultimately, and when you look at kind of compare these competitively bid prices, many times the vendors, and I'll talk in a broad perspective on this one, many times the vendors give the exact same bid to a variety of different competitively or RFP processes that were competitively bid. With that, what it gains us is a lot of staff time associated with this, as you said, from an administrative overhead cost perspective, but it also forces them into the same component that if we went out to RFP or somebody else went out to RFP, which is ultimately what happened, they're having to compete against a variety of different companies, which helps to keep costs under control.
Hey, Ben, can you clarify that we do have the ability financially to cover the costs? They're part of the overall Medic One budget. Although the Medic One projections of revenues have been a little bit reduced, but this will still be part of something that can be covered with the financial means of the Medic One fund, correct?
Absolutely, yes. This can be covered by the financial means of the Medic One Fund. We have built this into the 10-year plan, just so everybody's aware, and it can be covered.
Thank you, that was my question.
And Ben, will you be ready to address this item this afternoon?
Yes, I can be prepared to address this item this afternoon.
Commissioners, is that okay with everyone? Okay. So add to this afternoon. Thank you. Moving on to item 6A, Public Health and Social Services, Department of Ecology, Local Solid Waste, Financial Assistance Amendment Number 1.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. The Public Health Social Services receives a grant from the state to provide services related to solid waste. And this is in coordination with Public Works, since Public Works covers the matching requirements of this grant through the tipping fees. This program has been effective, and we have made aware there is an additional $80,000 that can be added to this contract. And this is the request that we asked the board to authorize the amendment to this current contract to receive an additional $80,000 from grant. Obviously, there is some matching requirements, which is already included on the tipping fees. The public works sends to public health to cover those items. The performance of this contract, it continues to be from July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2023. And again, this item is to add funding to the already existing contract. Patrick Soderberg is here to add additional perspective.
Patrick, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think the county manager covered that very well. This gives us an additional $80,000 to our existing grant, which we plan to pay down before the end of the contract on June 30th of this year.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Eckworth?
Maybe to Robin and the funds that cover this, anything general fund in here? Thank you.
Commissioner Munson?
Hey, Patrick, will you be able to address this item this afternoon?
Absolutely.
Okay. So just as a heads up, we will be pausing at 3:30 to do the public hearing this afternoon. And then after that, we might be resuming our agenda back up. Before we take a break, let's go ahead and do proclamations through PIO check-in.
If I may, just as a result of the decisions the board made, next week's Board of County Commissioners meeting, the 2 afternoons, has been canceled.
Yes, thank you. Jump straight ahead.
Good morning, Jamie Caldwell, Clerk of the Board. Outside of what's already been reviewed for the proclamations, I don't have any further updates. For boards and commissions, the standing applications have been included for your review. I'll be following up with both the Black Lake Special District and the Agricultural Advisory Committee for appointment recommendations at the end of this week. If I don't hear from either of them sooner, each is supposed to be meeting this week to review applicants. I believe the Special District met yesterday, and I think the Ag Committee meets on the 20th. So I'm hoping to have an update for you next week. Storm and Surface Water Advisory Board is recommending reappointment of the applicant as requested. Quick update for the Auditor's Office. They are finishing off vetting citizen appointments to the Commission on Salaries for elected officials. They have to have action taken by April 30th per RCW 36.17.024. I haven't got completed AIS yet, so I don't believe that they've been able to get through the surveys yet to make sure that who they're looking at qualifies to be appointed to it. But I can get you the information as soon as they get it to me later this week. Since we are canceling the meeting of the 25th, is it possible that we schedule something just to take action on that one particular item to get in before the 30th?
We can probably have an item during agenda setting.
Okay.
I know the Commissioner may not be available, but I believe that is a pressing matter for the board to consider. I mean, we can always schedule an action during agenda setting.
Okay. Usually we don't have any comments on salary commission appointments anyways, just because of,
It is a recommendation
process,
from the process the auditor goes through it.
yeah, so it's usually just a,
Yeah, it's just formal approval.
yeah,
Perfect. I will let them know. Thank you.
okay. Commissioners, are you ready to move forward on Britt Netterhood? Okay, so can we add that one to our agenda?
What about Black Lake? What do you say?
I haven't gotten an update from them yet. They were supposed to be meeting yesterday, and they did receive a second application outside of the one that they were recommending initially. So I'll follow up with them by the end of this week to figure out who they're recommending out of the two.
Thank you. PIO check-in.
Good morning, Commissioners. Excuse me. Megan Porter, Public Information Supervisor. Just a very quick update. So the Friday 5 went out for the first time last Friday in about 6 months. We had a good open rate, which means people who received it in their email opened it at 48%. Industry average for government is 35%. So we're above industry average. And then the click-through rate means they went through the entire document was 6.4%. Industry average is 2%. So it was above average for last week's first new Friday 5 after 6 months. We have 339 subscribers, which is up 15 in the last week. So we will just keep doing that every Friday, and we will get more people getting information from the county on a weekly basis in their inbox.
Thank you.
Pending questions, that's what I have.
Questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay. Is legislative update gonna be?
Just a minute or two.
Okay.
I have the report. As you see, some of the bills have been windowed down, some have been approved, some to highlight for you is on page 1, House Bill 1049. That's related to the timelines addressing the county commissioners district boundaries, has been approved, I believe, signed by the governor. On page 3, the House Bill 1645, that is related to the meetings of the county legislative authorities. That bill allows a little more flexibility as to when you meet outside of the county seat. That has been delivered to the governor, and I believe the governor already signed it, but I need to double check. And on the same page, page 3, Senate Bill 5627, which concerns the salary commission, has been signed. Commissioner Mejia, I believe, attended the signing ceremony. And one new item that I have for you is on the bottom of page 3, which is Senate Bill 5770. And this is a bill that was introduced last week in the Senate, and that replaces the two bills that it was related to lifting the 1% cap on the property taxes. That was moved to the Ways and Means Committee of the Senate, and the conversation will continue this week. And this is the last week of the regular session, if they don't extend it. So whether this bill becomes part of the process. And this bill, why was introduced? Because it was determined that this particular item is necessary to implement the budget. And that is why this continues to be part of the conversation at the legislature. So more to come on that particular bill. I don't know where that goes, but we'll see. By next week, we should have a pretty good understanding as to what bills are becoming law or not.
Thank you. Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
No questions, thank you.
Questions, Commissioner Menzer? Okay, and thank you to both commissioners for signing on to the proviso that came through on Friday in terms of legacy forest as well as funding for encumbered lands and the transfer program. So last minute addition is what Paul said from WASAC, a lot of negotiations between the industry and environmental groups, and this was really good middle ground that they agreed to. With that, we'll go on break for 15 minutes and then we'll be back.
Thank you.
Okay, we are back from break. It is 11:09 and we left off with briefing, public hearing decisions pending. And the first item is bonus to county employees, and this is a follow-up from a closed session that we had on March 28th. And so,
Thank you, Madam Chair. And also, the initial briefing was on March 28th as well. And let me just frame the conversation a little bit and for context. The reason as to why staff brought this for your consideration, as you may recall, during the budget process, there was a desire by the board to have a one-time retention bonus to county employees. And we were trying to align that with the current contracts that we have negotiated. Unfortunately, those are moving into the mediation. So at this point, we don't know, at least one of the major contracts is moving to mediation. I don't know when that will be resolved. So the initial conversation on this particular item, it was for the board to consider, and again, a one-time retention bonus for non-represented employees. That will be represented employees that are not covered by the current contracts that we're negotiating. And it will not include the employees covered by the sheriff deputies contract nor the corrections contract. Those will not be part of this particular action if the board decides to move forward to it. Also, it will not include elected officials on this particular action. The rest will be part of your consideration. We provided to you a little bit of perspective in terms of March 28th. What will be the options in terms of dollars and cents that you may consider. We provided with an option of $1,200, and that will be covered mainly by the loss of revenue that we moved from the ARPA funds into the general fund. Also, we provided you with an upper limit of $2,000 bonus, and that will be a combination of the lost revenue of the ARPA funds, including some of the other funds such as road fund and other funds that some employees may be covered, just to make sure that we cover the delta between $1,200 and $2,000. That was the background related to this particular action. A couple of next steps, if the board considers moving forward, whatever amount you would like to move, we will bring a formal resolution to affirm your action. If the board decides on an amount today, we'll bring that resolution for your consideration on the May 2nd Board of County Commissioners. And as a result, we'll try to make on the May 25th paycheck materialize that decision that you may take today. Those are the steps we are trying to take. And again, just to reiterate, this is for this item that you may take today is for non-represented employees. It will exclude the employees covered by the sheriff deputies contract. It will exclude the employees covered by the corrections contract, and also will exclude all the employees that we're currently negotiating the contracts with this year. And elected officials will be excluded. That's all I have for you. Any questions, any additional information you may like to do before you discuss among yourselves any potential action?
questions, Commissioner Edwards?
How many bargaining units do we negotiate with?
Have left?
No, not have left total. I'm just, how many do we have total?
Yeah, okay.
And the reason I ask that is I think the public should know how complicated this whole process is. And might wonder, well, why have we covered some but not others? And, my whole thing is trying to be as fair as we can possibly be as we move forward. So having 10 bargaining units, I in my sheriffing days, I think I had 5 or something that I was dealing with. So it's complicated. And retention to me is a big issue, probably more important than recruitment because of the expertise that different employees develop in the course of their work. And I think it's just really worth keeping them here. So that kind of explains why we're doing this right now, is because we've done it for some, haven't done it for others. We're held up in some segments of the bargaining process. And so if we wait until everything is done, we might be into 2024
Perhaps.
by the time it was done. And these funds will get ate up through evaporation, I might say, because the process here in which we're trying to overcome, money just is not worth what it was. And so I think it's just vitally important that we do something, because we don't always have the resources to be able to do things. And here we've been innovative in coming up with something. So I'm looking at about 17 and a half myself. That's kind of trying to come up with a compromise to not overburden our general fund by any means, but be as fair as we can with those, because some have already gotten through the negotiation process. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And thank you, matter clarification, commissioners. The reason that I excluded the sheriff deputies, employees covered by the sheriff deputies contract, the corrections. We already negotiated a contract that encompasses 3 years. The sheriff deputies contract includes a bonus. In the corrections contract, they choose not to exercise the option of a bonus, and then went with a little bit higher cost of living increase. That is why I'm stating those employees covered under those contracts will not be included by any potential action the board may take today.
I think Commissioner Edwards did a great, actually, sort of summation of all the issues, and I agree to a large extent. I mean, I guess my only consideration is my position is that we set aside this amount of money, not set aside, but we earmarked in a way. I think we should get that money out to employees. And if we do that, and it was like $12.50 or something, that doesn't, my understanding is it doesn't prejudice our ongoing negotiations and settlement. We can always supplement after the mediation is complete with the bargaining unit. So that's where I'm at.
You suggested was $17.50 or $12.50?
He said $17.50.
I said $17.50.
My position is to allocate the money we set aside from lost revenue, and then depending on where those contract negotiations.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
We can backfill, but I don't want to compromise those in any way. But I do want to get money out because we set it aside, and as Commissioner Edwards said, to hold it for months and months more is not serving the purpose of why we set it aside, which is to appreciate and retain employees when we have that opportunity, which, as Commissioner Edwards pointed out, is not always the case. So it's just a matter of degree, but I think we should get this done.
So as before, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, to clarify in terms of leaving money, and Robin can attest to the fact perhaps, if the board takes an action on whatever amount the board decides on non-represented employees, there will be enough financial capacity to cover the same amount for the upcoming negotiations. Is that correct?
So if the board approves an amount of 1,250 or less, we would pay the entire amount out of ARPA lost revenue. If it's any amount higher than that, we would pay the amount attributable to general fund out of ARPA lost revenue, and everything else would be paid from the
Restricted funds.
yeah, the restricted funds that
Except
employees.
LMD fund.
Yeah, that an employee is
Thank you for the
normal.
clarification. That's right. So,
Did you want to add something else?
No, I wasn't, that.
Okay, that was it? Okay.
Ma'am, we haven't heard from Maria about, but do we even want to cover that we're kind of raising the threshold if we do X, whatever X might be? Is that something we're going to cover, or is that not, or no, we're not covering? Okay, good enough, thank you.
Okay. And then for me, I also echo what Commissioner Edwards said, and I'm on the same page as Commissioner Edwards in terms of the amount of $1,750. I think it's, if we have the ability, it's not often that we have this revenue source that we're able to be able to do something like this. And if it's, you know, I know employees have been waiting a while for it, and it was something where we said, you know, we would only do the 2.5% COLA, but there would be a bonus coming through for those non-represented employees while we were still ongoing with negotiations. And I think $1,750 is a good balance.
Maybe I could ask Commissioner Menzer. I'm trying to clarify something. So was it your intention to say that maybe $1,250 now and then $500 later? Is that what I was hearing?
Or more. I mean, I just don't want to make a decision above $1,250, not knowing where the contracts are going to land with our represented employees. That's all. So I might be making a motion, you know, in a few months to add $750 to my $1,250.
So we might, what I'm hearing is on your proposal, we might do two disbursements, so to speak.
Correct.
And we don't know what the second would be.
Or how much.
Or how much. Kind of depending, I guess, is the best way to put it. But for right now, to get it out, it would be flat $250 to cover what $1,250 to cover kind of what our negotiating team is saddled with the complications, and I want to commend them for all their hard work too. So I don't want to put them in a situation that makes it harder, and I think that's what you're trying to come up with, is a level that we can address the retention and yet address the negotiation at the same.
That's what I was trying to do. I don't know if I did it, but that's absolutely what I was trying to accomplish.
And so I am still at the $1,750, but I'm not so sure that I don't respect that position of doing $1,250 now, and I don't know what Madam Chair thinks about that. I don't know. It helps Maria to complete her task, because she's got a darn tough task.
I mean, the way the two sheriff's groups chose different paths, you know, shows that different groups are gonna approach different things, and I just wanted to keep you guys with maximum flexibility to.
So we're trying to be benevolent, but we don't wanna shoot down the other half of our
But
team.
not leave everybody else hanging for, you know, completely. So I don't know, that was the thought, but see, I'm not gonna lose any sleep if you guys vote for 70-50 either, so I think they're all reasonable courses of action.
I'm not opposed. I just want to, for me, where I stand is I want to give something out to the employees as soon as possible, especially the non-represented ones, because they've been waiting for this, right? You know, it was that 2.5, and then negotiations have just gone on much longer than what we initially thought. So I just want to really get something out there for employees that have been kind of waiting and
You
So
know,
that seems to be unanimous by the
Yeah.
board, the desire to give a retention bonus to non-represented employees. That seems pretty obvious on this conversation. So
We are talking about only the non-represented at
non-represented
this time.
employees, at this point,
and the
non-represented
sheriff's office,
Oh, the
excluded.
sheriff's
Excluding,
office
yeah,
is
yeah,
continuing
right,
to.
yeah.
That's different. So, so at this point is the amount.
I-
You
I
need to
guess,
agree on something.
continuing that, no matter what we do, the employees are not gonna be made whole having to do with inflation. I mean, what happens? They're gonna end up taking a 3%, 4% pay cut. If you think about the spending, the purchasing power of the dollar. So, I think Commissioner Menser actually presents a pretty solid reason for doing it in two steps, I guess. Because we've still got quite a ways to go. How many units? How many more bargaining?
that we're bargaining.
So, and maybe we can cover what you and I, Madam Chair, were talking about as far as trying to get this out and address. Does that make sense to you?
Well, it does. It really does. I guess my other thing would be like, we don't know how long negotiations are going to take, right? And I think that's why, for me, it was just kind of a, let's, do something for this year because, I guess we will if we do it, we're gonna end up doing it for 2 separate years, right? For 2023, it's gonna be $12.50 and it might be, a little bit more in 2024.
It could be, depending on when we finalize the contracts.
Yeah. That's all hanging fire.
Yeah.
But at least this is.
Assuming, I think the conversation is that you want to bring parity to the employees covered under their contract, the employees covered, they're not covered. I think that's the conversation that I'm sensing. That's the undertone is at some point you'd like to bring parity.
I'd like to make sure we give them enough money, at least so they can buy gas to get to work for the rest of the year. Cause I think it's good about to get ate up. So something, okay, so that would be my preference, but
So
I'm not
it's two
locked.
proposals, $12.50 or $17.50.
Is the 12.50 with the recognizing that we're gonna do something else, but we just don't know what?
That's a future decision the board needs
Yeah,
to take.
but that's
You're
our
not-
inclination of where we would be going with it.
I know with 2 additional commissioners, they might feel different, so just.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess that is true, I guess. I mean, it's possible.
I guess for me, I'll go with the $17.50 because we'll know what the budget impact is going to be before the budget amendment goes through and
Bonus,
for
yeah.
the bonus, and we can actually see what the impact is going to be to the other funds. It leaves HR still room to negotiate, I believe, and
So Commissioner Mejia, $17.50.
Commissioner Edwards gets to decide for once.
That's what I put at him.
Well, now I might adjust my bargaining staff to 1,500. Because as far as getting it right, I understand allowing Robin and us as commissioners to know what we're dealing with.
I'll go with 1,500, yeah, that's true. Solution.
Commissioner Mejia. So thank you. So 1,500.
and so when will this be coming out?
So this, we'll bring a resolution for you to affirm formally this item on the May 2nd meeting since we don't have a meeting next week. And soon after that, this bonus will materialize on those employees who have been affected by this action on the May 25th check.
And does that work? Does that,
That timing works for us.
She gave me the timing.
okay,
Because we'd like to do it prior to any go live, and we know how to do it in the current system, so we can get it right.
And then you'll be learning for next time around if we have to cover anything.
and I do wanna compliment Maria and Tara about all the HR negotiations that have went into this very complicated process. So thank you both very much for it.
Everyone recognize the labor negotiations, they're quite a task, but they're doing a terrific job with what we've got in our reality.
Tough times yet to come for employees.
Thank you. Thank you, commissioners.
Next is Thurston 2045 scope of work.
Thank you, commissioners, and this is a follow-up to the briefing you received last week, April 12th, and related to the scope of work for Thurston 2045. So allow me to use a framing of this conversation, because the decisions that we asked the board to do today, perhaps, is not that you are providing staff the direction to start working on those particular items. What you're creating is an umbrella as to what the items the staff needs to work on developing the scope of work of those items that you might decide to include them. And at a later date, they will bring staff with items related to the level of effort in terms of staffing and costs and everything. And those items will be eventually be added to the docketing process that you exercised on a yearly basis. So today is perhaps you're not approving any particular item to move forward. It's just creating that umbrella for staff to start working on a specific scope of work. So there's two elements of this decision is the required items, updates, and I believe that was included in your packet today. That is on slide 11. And the optional updates, which is included on slide 12. And that is what perhaps we asked the board to provide direction. Josh?
That's correct. Thank you, County Manager. I would say, just to use another analogy, what we're trying to accomplish, we have the required elements. So we know what train cars we have to have per the required. And the request is what other train cars and the optional the board would like to add. So that's really the request, is what optional train cars would you like to add? As the county manager relayed, this is not necessarily time to decide what items are loaded into the train cars, but for the board to decide those optional items that we decide to bring forward, also for the board's consideration on what gets loaded on those train cars. I know I'm using an analogy, but I want to make it very simple, that we're not at the place yet to have all of the deep, detailed conversations about each one of the items, but really just to get your direction on what of those optional items you would like to see added to the scope. And as we provided for the first time ever, for your benefit to help make that decision, we ran it through the planning commission to get their input on what they thought should be added in terms of the optional items. And so that's what we've tried to present to you, is to provide you more opportunities and information to help you make this decision. So we're open to receive any questions. There is a timeline, as we've talked about in the past. Having this decision as soon as possible will impact our ability to receive a grant from Commerce that we'll be applying for, which is listed in the packet as well. So just know that if the question of what's the timing on this, it's related directly to dollars and making sure that we're in line to receive those dollars. So your direction is important, as always.
And in order to access those grants, there needs to be a legislative action, I believe.
That's correct.
Affirming the scope of work. And legislative action will be in the resolution. So I just want to make sure that we talk about.
Timeline.
The planning commission is recommending that we go with everything?
This, I believe so, and it was 9-0-1, one absent, but it was almost unanimous for those present.
And that is so that we can kind of address
Slide
everything.
18 has the votes. It was per item.
Yeah, it's here on, 19.
Yeah, their votes are in a couple of different places, and that's one.
I'm inclined to go with the planning commission because they're the ones that have got the most briefing on this.
Do you see slide 19, Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah,
I'll weigh in if you want. So interestingly, my feelings kind of go exactly in order of the strength of the planning commission votes. The three that got 8-0 or 7-1, I'm supporting inclusion for sure. The two that got 5-3 votes were also two that staff said had gotten robust updates in 2019, so I'm gonna exclude those. And the one I'm on the fence about is land use. It got a 6-2 vote. Chris explained it to me at a one-on-one that I understand it a lot better, and I think it could be really useful, but it seems like a heavy lift and not something that's mandatory to do, so I'm kind of on the fence about it. If we felt like it was too expensive, if we felt like the full meal deal was too expensive, that's a $75,000 item, and I could be persuaded either way on the land use. I think ultimately we may want to do that, but whether we have to do it in this cycle is an open question from my perspective. So that's kind of where I'm at.
I unfortunately didn't have the opportunity to meet with Chris. But, so I guess I'll ask my questions a little bit on kind of what the economic element and the health element cover is my first one. Since those were the ones that got the least votes for, and I'm just wondering in terms of like the planning there was no real conversation with the planning commission, but just if you can kind of explain what was explained to them and.
Maya can do that. Maya can do a little bit generally understand the health and the economic.
Yes, I think someone was asking me to explain that. I couldn't hear you very well on the audio, but our economic element, both our economic element and our health element are chapters within the comprehensive plan. And the economic element covers economic trends in Thurston County, things like employment, commute to employment centers, workforce trends, things like that. And that did get a robust update in 2019. And the Economic Development Council completed that update. The health chapter in the comprehensive plan covers how the built environment interacts with health and what the implications are of that. So it considers things like walkability, water quality, water quantity, proximity, and food access issues, and then also things like tobacco cessation. And so there's another number of components that are health related that are covered in that chapter. And the big update in 2019 was to incorporate new principles from Thurston Thrives, since that had been updated since that chapter last saw revisions to it. So we worked with Public Health and Social Services to do a robust update to that chapter in 2019. And I believe the final action on that was actually taken in 2020, so a little bit more recently. And both of those chapters just look at any new plans that have come into play, changing trends, and data that we have available to do those updates. There has been a pandemic since our last periodic update, but it's unclear how much of that data is actually available in hard documents that we would incorporate to these types of chapters. So, we can say that there have probably been changes in trends, but we may not have the statistics on those yet to incorporate into the plan. It's unclear on that. But both of these updates could probably be lighter updates. We would outsource them if they were added as optional elements. And I believe we're allotting $15,000 for professional services funding if those optional updates are included.
So touching on the economic element, and Maya, you touched on it, right? Especially the workforce trends. Since 2019, our workforce trends have changed. We've seen just more retirements. We've seen not as many people entering the workforce as they're exiting out. It's an employee market right now, not really an employer's market. And so I find that piece like really interesting, and I feel like it really something that, we can look at, but you're saying that the data's really hasn't caught up with it?
Yes, it's unclear. We haven't, I mean, we're just, like Josh said, the analogy is we're identifying what train cars we want to load. We haven't gone in and looked at all the data as of now, but typically from things like a pandemic or any sort of major workforce trends, people moving out of cities into rural areas or vice versa, sometimes it takes a while to capture that in the reports that we use. And census data is a good example. It typically comes out a couple of years after the data is collected, and then that's implemented into the plans. So there's a little bit of a lag period. We're just not sure of how much of that is reflected already.
And then with the health element, you mentioned Thurston Drives was involved in some way.
It was mainly race equity.
Okay.
The elements that we put in on the recommendation from Thurston.
Yeah, they provided a good feedback on that chapter 9, I think. Yeah, 2020.
And then you also mentioned food access. That kind of perked my ears up because, like food access, I think back to our agricultural systems and kind of what does that food access really entail?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I'm remembering that some of the food access pieces were related to academic schools for primary and younger children and then high school and what the food situation looks like in there. And then also how many younger folks in the county are without meals per day. I would have to go back and look at the details of that. But the policies are fairly general in Chapter 11, Health Chapter, and across the comprehensive plan. So policies around food access are intended to be general, broad-based supporting policies, and they touch a lot of different pieces of the plan. So, there are economic pieces that play into that. There are land use pieces that play into that. Creating connections between schools and then agricultural markets, and just general support for that type of stuff.
So what I'm hearing is I'm assuming that I'd like to confirm the board is agreeing and including all the required items, just because that seems to be intuitive. But I just want to make sure that you talk about that to include the required items that we have in place. Is that? Yeah. Yep. Yep. Just
Required items, yes, yeah.
Yep. And on the optional items, what I'm hearing is Commissioner Edwards would like to go with the Planning Commission recommendation, which includes the 6 items included on slide 19, which is the implementation of the plan, future land use updates, incorporate county-wide industrial lands, study findings, the climate change element, economic element, and health element. Commissioner Minister's suggestion is not to include the economic element and health elements, and perhaps having a further conversation on the future land use. That's what instead. Commissioner Mejia.
I'm leaning to, I know it's more expensive, but to opening them all up as well, taking the planning commission's recommendation. Well, there was robust studies done in 2019. I feel like the pandemic shifted a lot of things that we need to update, and I think it's a good time to update if we're opening them up anyway, so.
So that's what I have is, so the optional items to go with the recommendations of the planning commission that includes of the 6 elements in a 2-to-1.
Thank you, commissioners.
Next item is Republic Solid Waste contract transition.
What? I think we have a copy of the PowerPoint. Commissioners, yeah, if you can check that. But you have a copy of the PowerPoint. Pretty straightforward, shouldn't take that long, to be honest with you. And this is just an update on the new contract for solid waste services that the county signed and you approved with Republic Services. It's just to bring you up to date as to some of the steps that we need to take and as the contract, I believe, becomes effective in May 2023. And we have Steve Gilmore from Republic Services here with us as a good partner, a long-term partner as the years to come. And it's just no decisions for you today. This is just to bring you, there was some elements they may require an update for you. But again, no decisions today, and this is just an update as the beginning of the new contract starts next month. Karen?
Karen Reeds, Assistant Director of Public Works. I guess I would just say that this has been a long journey that we've taken with the board. We started, if you may recall, we started back in September of 2019 with an RFP process that was quite extensive and comprehensive, and here we are 3.5 years later and on the cusp of, I think, a really exciting milestone, which is the transfer of the contract to one service provider, Republic Services. And so that is happening on May 1st. So we just want to give you an overview of all of the steps that have been taken, especially over the last year since we signed the contract back in April last year. So with that, I will turn it over to Jeff Bickford, our solid waste manager.
As Karen mentioned, it's been 3+ years since in this process. We really kicked it off back in September of 2019, and it was decided really to not renew a contract or amend the existing contract, but to go out with a request for proposals. Basically, we released that request for proposals in January of 2021, received them in April of that same year, and ultimately brought forth the recommendation reviewing those proposals to the board at the end of June of 2021, where it was decided to begin contract negotiations with Republic Services, which those negotiations went on from July through November of 2021, and ultimately, after a couple of briefings with the board, a public meeting was held on March 22nd of 2022, and April 5th of last year, the contract was approved and signed. So, based upon that, Republic and we worked out a transition timeline from that point of the contract being signed until May 1st, when it ahead of a bunch of different processes, really on all of these. There was a number of different plans, operations plans, and various additional items that had to be developed initially. Those are important because particularly that operations plan is key to getting our solid waste transportation public health. Key on with that, as well as plans for equipment acquisition, coordinating with their subcontractors, staff hiring, as well as so some of the highlights of the transition, the operations and maintenance manual was prepared, actually I believe by HDR and submitted to staff and approved. Additionally, as part of that, There's a number of different plans, an emergency plan, spill response plan, containment plan, safety and security plans, transportation, contingency, waste screening, and protocol plans. Those, again, were all put together, submitted, reviewed, and ultimately approved by the department back last fall. Since September of last year, we've had monthly and even occasionally a little bit more than that, coordination meetings between the public staff and public works staff, just to make sure that, we're going over a lot of these different processes to make sure that they're on steps and moving forward. So that's been going well to date. We just recently had a coordination meeting between Republic's financial team as well as our fiscal and finance group, just to hash out billings, how that's going to happen, the transfer of data and information as far as weights, that sort of thing. We've also lined up, the Republic has lined up agreements with their subcontractor vendors. There's a number of, that they have subs that we have subs, but they've gotten agreements in line, for example, acceptance of metals, appliances and tires for recycling, glass, as well as a couple other service contracts such as site security, which they're responsible for, as well as pest control for the site. So they've got those lined up at this point. Additional highlights, the equipment, the ordering of equipment began, I believe, about the day after the contract was signed. That was a key piece because, as you know, with supply chain issues, they wanted to get as much lead as they could on that because there were some long lead times on some of that equipment. So to date, I mean, of course, it's all is ordered. To date, at least a little over a third of it's actually physically on site now. As it's been showing up, we've set aside an area at the Waste Recovery Center that they've been able to locate that equipment as it's being delivered. The remaining equipment is set to be on site within the next 2 weeks, so it'll be before May 1st. A new requirement, the key piece of this new contract is the Republic will now need us, for the first 2 years of the contract, they'll need to have a minimum of 2 days of the intermodal shipping containers physically on site, which we define a day as being basically 30 containers per day. So for the first 2 years, the contract requires them to have 60 containers available on site. After the third year, that becomes 3 days worth, so 90 containers. And that's important because, as you know, the key for us for keeping, operations there is having the containers to load up, to move it out. So if there is a hiccup in either the transportation or the rail, we would have these containers available again to load that waste and keep the operations moving for our customers. They purchased 150 brand new containers as part of this agreement. So not all of those will be on site because obviously they're moving in and out, on the rail down to Roosevelt to the landfill and then back. So, but that was done in order to make sure we had adequate containers available at the facility. As far as getting the personnel and the hiring, they tendered offers to 21 of existing Waste Connection staff that are currently working at the facility. Of those, 18 of that 21 accepted positions. So practically 2/3 of the staffing for this facility will actually be employees that are already working there right now. And one of the key pieces is the key position of the operations manager was actually filled from an existing Waste Connections employee. Actually, the individual who works currently just directly under John Cox. So he'll be the operations manager, a gentleman named Jason Frank. So like I said, they're going to end up with essentially 30 total employees that operate the work and the 2 drop-off sites. And as of about a week or so ago, 26 of those 30 were on staff with interviews going on currently. So they should be up and ready to run. So again, it's important to note that virtually 2/3 of the staff that they're going to have already work at the site, so they're familiar. So that should help when the takeover happens to have operations. Because they have people know what they're doing out there versus something else being pulled and not understanding how that facility is operating. one of our key responsibilities was obtaining the solid waste transfer station permit, effective May 1, because from public health, that was submitted. We actually have that in hand. The key for that was having the new operations plan that Republic put together. So that was submitted a number of months ago, and we actually have it. So it's ready to go as soon as May 1st hits. We're currently operating under another permit that is actually held by Waste Connections. That goes up to April 30th.
So a key part of the hiring of the current staff was, we came in and actually gave them basically their time with Waste Connections as a Republic employee. So day one, they're starting with benefits, time off, as well as they were under market by about 10% in terms of their salaries. So they're gonna have higher salaries, same benefits, better benefits, and same time off that they have currently. So that was a really good opportunity for us. Jason is excited. I had lunch with him yesterday. He's looking at finding opportunities for our employees to engage in the community cleanups, Habitat for Humanity buildings, that sort of thing. So I think you're gonna see a lot of Republic employees in the community doing good work.
One additional thing I want to mention, as far as key differences between what we're doing currently under our current contract and will be happening after May 1st, it really has to do with the Dropbox facilities. Currently, it's just our employees that operate those facilities. As part of this new contract, there'll be 2 Republic employees at each of the Dropbox sites on the days that they're open. One of them will be responsible for, screening loads as people come in to make sure there's no inappropriate materials that are going into the containers, as well as Republic is supplying a backhoe at each of those 2 facilities where they can then compact the boxes, which will actually reduce the number of hauls away because you'll get more material in before you have to haul those boxes away and back up to the work.
I want to do a time check because we do have a 20-minute session, so, and then we still have the annexation. Can that be?
And the other key piece is that one of our employees will be monitoring the recycling area, which will actually increase the value of our recyclables coming out of there with less contamination. Then I do want to just give a quick overview of Brady, because I know Brady was a key concern that we talked about. They actually received their ORCA permit back in late spring last year, as well as receiving Mason County's permit, Department of Ecology approval. They're permitted for a process up to 70,000 tons. Right now, we're generating about 30,000, so they have room to expand, and as we expand, they have capacity to be able to do that. As you see from the picture there, they began constructing their building they're going to operate in late last summer. And that and all the facilities around it were completed last month. So it's looking good. They lined their stormwater pond actually last week. So they are basically up and ready to operate as of May 1st. So we're looking good. There's some photos there that were of the showing the aeration system under the floor that helps them do active composting. And essentially, my last piece is what's still pending. We have actually this Friday, contract facility walkthrough where we will go through with the photos, video, we go through all 3 facilities, look at the condition of everything that's there, video it. And this is important for at the end of the agreement, we also do the same thing, so we know what the condition of everything it was when it if we were to go out, then they would need to be able to bring those, the facilities back to that level of condition minimally. Additionally, we would deploy the rest of the equipment and
I think we can probably just.
operate them and then open up.
Thank you. On the agenda still to go, but.
Are there any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner Edwards?
Jeff, you said 2/3 of the folks stayed, but it sounds like we're getting 4 more FTEs at the 2 at each drop site?
So the Dropbox facilities will, part of those total employment numbers, on the days that the Dropbox sites are open, they'll have 2 Republic employees at each of those facilities that'll assist with operations, correct?
So we won't have any employees at
No, we
those?
will have.
Yes, we'll still have
In
our.
addition to the county employees.
We'll have 1 or 2 at each one?
We always have a minimum of 2 and occasionally 3, because we will still collect the funds and weigh the loads, or measure the loads there.
There's gonna be 5 FTEs there, some
2 or 3 of ours, and then
up to 5 could be at each one.
Which that's gonna it really streamline the processing of the loads.
Are we gonna expand the hours? Cause that's always been a question by the public about having adequate hours.
actually, we will be coming to the board with some information on that.
Okay.
Great news on the Brady facility, and it sounds like you guys did a lot of work, and I appreciate it. It looks like we're ready to go, and it's very exciting.
Topic is being delivered this week at the work. They bring it in 5 trucks, so they'll be assembling it. So when I know for sure when the assembly is gonna happen, you folks should come out and watch it. It's pretty incredible.
And we visited the Brady facility, and it is very impressive what they've done. You know, it's a small business that has really grown.
And if anyone wants to visit the site, please let me know and Jeff and I can coordinate that.
Last week I was in the absolutely middle of nowhere in Nevada, hiking in the desert, and there's Republic bins, you know, that service like.
Everywhere.
Especially there, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Looking forward to a long-term partnership, a successful partnership.
Okay, next is the City of Yelm proposed annexation.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners. No action is required for today. We just want to bring this matter for your attention. The City of Yelm has proposed 5 different parcels through 5 different requests for annexations. I have included a whole packet for you in the back. As a matter of background, the staff from CPED, Jeremy specifically, has taken the lead and really provided a synopsis of the proposed annexations, which is included in the additional information that I provided to you. And it's, so that gives you where the annexation will occur. It varies from 15 acres, 5 acres, 12 and a half acres, 3.4 acres, and 9.7 acres. And most of the, if not all, the annexations are in between old residential annexations as part of the land designation, land use and their UGA. So the next step in the process, obviously, there is a deadline of May 22nd for the board to, you know, exercise your duty to claim jurisdiction, and that will go through the boundary review board for further conversations, public hearing, so on and so forth. If there is not a required action by the board, if you're not planning to take an action, nothing for you to do, the process just moves forward. And one of the options, the staff is going to go through the process in assessing the economic or the impacts overall of this proposed annexations to the county. That information is going to come back to you maybe in a couple of weeks, obviously prior to May 22nd. And that will give you yet another piece of information as to how you could or not exercise your legislative authority. Anything to add?
No, thank you for that. I appreciate that, County Manager. I'd also add, CPED has worked to be programmatic and not have the board caught off guard when this information comes in from the different jurisdictions. So again, another thank you to Jeremy for ensuring that the board has this information as quickly as possible so you can physically see where these annexations are. We also internally are ensuring that we're engaging with the other departments, public health, public works. Jeremy can speak more to that. But again, this is a success in trying to grow, making sure that the information is provided to you as quickly as possible so that you are informed as soon as you can be. Jeremy, would you like to add anything?
Sure. Just one point, if your board does request the boundary review board review of an annexation, and that's if you decide to do that, they have several decisions they can make on an annexation. They can deny it, they can approve it as presented by the City of Yelm, or they can modify the boundaries of the annexation to reduce or increase the size. If they decide to increase the size, it can only be up to 100% of the land area. So when you see at the bottom of the memo I gave to you, you see 3 options on there. You don't have deny on there, but I do have on there approve. If you think the annexation is fine, we take no action. If we would like the boundary review board to modify the boundary, that's where we would submit a letter to the boundary review board requesting that they review it, and we would state the reason for that review. We're gonna work closely with affected county departments, and I still need to contact the budget office for the fiscal impact. We're gonna work really closely and gather what those impacts are to the county and bring them back to you at a future board meeting.
Thank you.
My brief take on the proposal, none of them create islands. And I think it's just an extension of the existing city boundaries. So.
Questions?
Any objections from citizens?
Based on the brief knowledge that I know now, and I still need to go back and confer with Yelm yet again, but I believe they already have signed waivers of petition from the property owners, so that would mean the property owner said, we're not gonna protest these annexations. So, as far as I know, but I'll have to reconnoiter back with the city.
And I guess, just before Commissioner Menzer jumps in, I think this is a good example of why we should rethink what we're requiring our planning staff to do when it comes to growth in these different municipalities of the UGA, expanding out into the UGA. Why should citizens, applicants, have to jump through so many hoops when it's gonna be part of this, in this case, it's gonna be part of Yelm, but whatever it is, I just don't understand why we're making citizens do a dual permit process. I'll just leave it at that.
Question.
On that point, I agree with you, and I continually prioritize the joint plans, which help, but I even went further and tried to propose that we do a pilot program with Lacey to let them be permitted. And Josh presented me with a long list of reasons why that wasn't.
Logistically, it was challenging.
Along with the City of Lacey Administrator,
Yeah,
provided some of that information as well.
yeah, I mean, it just came from me to you, I'm not blaming you, but I'm just saying.
I didn't hear blame.
You communicated to me that idea can hit some roadblocks, but it's definitely a goal of mine, I agree with you. It sounds silly. What I'd like to see is kind of like the next level of just like as to each one, what's trying to be accomplished, right? Like I just kind of like to know the story, like, you know, like with Lacey, it's like, okay, this is an old mobile home park and they want to turn it into a city park. So, okay, I get where we're headed. All right, this one was because, you know, they all have a story, right? There's a reason why they've chosen these 5 parcels, and just to kind of have a sense of, hey, we're already responding to a lot of problems there, and county's not responsive, and we think we can do a better job with law enforcement in this neighborhood if it's Yelm police responding. Whatever it is, I'd like to kind of hear that, because, you know, on the face of it, it's hard to know whether it's good, bad, or.
We can summarize the information that's provided on this.
Is that in the packet? I have not
Each
had a
of the
chance.
applications is there's a kind of review board, it speaks for the most part.
Okay,
That
I will
doesn't-
go through these.
But we can summarize that to a great extent if you like, yeah.
Well, and we'll confer with the city as well, so.
Story.
Madam Chair, can I just ask one question? Possibly, there's enough reasons that it isn't feasible, my proposal, that it'd be worth the board hearing, all the board hearing why that's not a good idea. And the public hearing why that's not a good idea. I think, and then maybe I'll quit bugging you, maybe.
No, the question, no, it is an excellent idea. But it's logistical elements that we couldn't overcome.
But the public should hear.
Yeah, no, that's
why
good.
that
I think
is
we
too.
can probably bring back because some of the logistical elements is as who will be the party in which they hear an appeal. As simple as that, for instance. And you cannot delegate that authority to the city of Lacey and vice versa. So all the logistical elements became difficult to overcome. So it is a great idea, don't take me wrong.
Not a value.
Maybe we need legislative change.
Could be,
Possible.
but maybe at some point we can bring that back again and just give you a perspective, at least from the staff level, in coordination with the city of Lacey staff, as the logistically it was complicated to overcome.
The City of Lacey staff did a good job of outlining their reasons why it was difficult.
Thank you. I guess, for my questions, I mean, the only one where I would even have any kind of concern would be the Yelm Bansal Morris Road annexation. And I would like to hear from like our first responders on that, because there'll be, although it does not create an island, there's that just little piece that's right there.
The inverse.
Yeah. And when we did the Lacey one, we heard from, you know, from our first responders on why we should do it, right? Because of the island effect and staffing from the sheriff's office. We also heard from Public Works as well. So just with that little piece that's just going to be kind of right there, I would want to know, does it create any issues? So the rest of them seem pretty, to go pretty well, but that's the only one where I saw where I would kind of want more information on.
That's helpful. And like I said at the beginning, that's why we're happy to be here earlier, so that it's not an emergency surprise.
Yeah,
So
no,
thank you for those.
appreciate it. Yeah.
So, will you be ready by May 2nd? I can bring this item again, just to make sure we give enough time for the board to.
Jeremy may not be here, but we'll have the information, and whatever we can get from Yelp and the other departments by the time, certainly.
Thank you. Okay, is there any emergency other commissioner items that we need to cover?
Thank you, guys, thank you.
Thank you.
Shouldn't take long. I wanted to ask about the May 1st, because I may not see you guys much between now and then, DNR field visit and who's going and what the parameters of that are.
I believe we have put in master calendar, and I believe all the commissioners are scheduled to go. It's a field visit, including myself.
Okay. And are you guys planning to go?
I don't know, I guess I hadn't really thought about it. It's legacy forest stuff?
Yeah.
You know, we sent the letter on the Juneau cut and the Board of Natural Resources paused the cut. DNR said they wanted to re-educate is what I call it, but you know, they wanted to, they said we had misconceptions in our letter and they wanted to take us out and when it was originally proposed, the Commissioner of Public Lands was gonna be there as well. I don't wanna be in that context alone, cause I've already done a field visit like that with through the Timber Counties Caucus with Wasac and DNR staff, so really wanted the full support of the board, or at least one of you.
What's the date, May 1st?
May 1st.
May 1st, it's Monday.
I can go.
It's
So-
included in your calendar. So.
They first were just inviting me and I said,
Yeah.
I said, I'm not sure I need to do this, but if you do think I need to do it, I want the board to go. So I just want to clarify what the plan is from our
And in
from our
fact, if
side.
there's a special meeting, we're trying to find a way as to how we notify that. So we're working all the logistics for the board to
I mean, that's
attend.
gonna take 4 hours to drive up there.
It's scheduled from 9 to 11:30 on a
So
Monday
it's a
morning.
whole morning.
Okay, well, I just wanted to check in on that. I appreciate it if we all.
Have you
Yeah.
kind of already been up there on that tour, on that one? Up
Not to
that
this particular cut, but a
area?
different.
You went on the Association of Counties.
Yeah, but they had the same people, like Dwayne Emmons and the leadership at DNR, taking us through one of their recent cuts to show us how they mark trees and what their policies are and how they replant and how they manage, you know, a certain area, and lots of questions were asked. It was a big group of us, commissioners. Anyway, the reason I was a little hesitant is because my objection about Juneau was less about the particular Juneau cut and more about the overall policy of sweeping through and ignoring older pieces of forest. So, you know, I don't want to get too down in the weeds about the Juneau cut and its ins and outs, because I want to talk at a higher level with their leadership about a broader strategy. And this new legislation might help us to some degree, but it's hot off the press. I don't know all the ins and outs. of what just got
Maybe that'll
passed.
be passed and everything will be done and we can
Can
figure
you
how
send the
it fits.
proviso to the commissioners?
What
sir?
you described sounded exactly like the thing that came out of the Senate. Remember, there was that
Yeah.
flurry of compromise out of the Senate, and then it was going over to the House, and the House was saying, I met with Representative Dolio, she's like, well, that's gonna be totally changed. But then what you described sounded like pretty much exactly what came out of the Senate, but I don't know, I haven't looked at it.
Yeah, so I'll have Sarah send the proviso to both of you. That way you can revise it. The one that Paul sent Sarah, please. And it kind of breaks it down really well and,
Very specific,
yeah.
very specific.
So I think it's, and both the industry and environmentalist groups, not sure which environmentalist groups they met with, were on board. And I know that Paul gathered several commissioners from different areas, both legacy forest and commissioners who are kind of dealing with DNR because of cuts and he spoke with us about this proviso and really wanted our support on there. So I'll have Sarah send that out and that way we can revise it, but fingers crossed. But yeah.
I mean, and that, depending on what's in there, it may create a direct pathway to dealing with the Juno cut. I don't know.
It could.
Okay. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll be there on May 1st and wear boots. Okay, we're going to executive session per RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1I to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency, litigation, or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or member acting in official capacity is or is likely to become a party, Patterson Lake LMD. This session will take approximately 20 minutes and commissioner's action may follow. Okay, we're back from executive session. It is 12:41 PM. We were in executive session for RCW 42.30.110 subsection 1I to discuss with legal counsel representing the agency litigation or potential litigation to which the agency, the governing body, or a member acting in official capacity is or reflects to become a party. Patterson LMD, and this will be this session, no commissioners' action follows. We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.